What is something you've changed your mind about recently or in a distant past?
So maybe this is not as deep of an answer as you may have been hoping, but one low-level thing is that we were going to Iceland several years ago, and we were going to be hiking a bunch and so on. And so I have a bit of a take a step back. I have a bit of an aversion that activity X requires all this equipment to do it well, and I tended to think that people go overboard with that. We're trying to have specialized equipment for every single thing that you want to do in life. When I feel like a lot of generic things might be good enough. So, for example, with hiking, this notion of like having good hiking shoes, which it'll sound ridiculous now as I say it out loud, but I used to feel like I was less convinced that you sort of need good hiking shoes. I feel like just good regular shoes might be sufficient. But I did end up buying hiking shoes for that trip, and I was glad about that. And so I think I have updated my world model a little bit, that it is important to think about the right tools for the right activity. A little bit more. I'm not 100% convinced, but I think I've moved over. Yeah. Yeah.
You're a good Bayesian. What
Um,
is something that you've changed your mind about recently or in distant past?
oh yeah, I mean, I did changed my mind about. Um, well, let's see. I don't. So it I apparently like well now that I think about it, since you asked, yeah, I guess I'm pretty stubborn in some sense. Although I did the one thing that we just talked about, that about the being compassionate about the the people who are not in the position of power or something like that. Until I never really thought about that until about, I don't know, 5 6 years ago. And then I guess what I realized is, I guess once I left Korea, because in Korea I was in a pretty good the situation. As I said, I was born to a professor father. My mother used to be a high school teacher, and my family is pretty well off. I mean, especially now they are pretty well off. I was raised in Seoul, which is the capital of Korea. So, and then I was educated pretty well. I did my undergrad in KAIST, which is one of the best universities in Korea. In fact, some might say that one of the best universities in East Asia or in general. So I never actually had a chance to to look at all these different corners of the society and so on. So whenever people talk to me about what I just said about how the society is not really being on the side of the people we should protect and so on, I never gave much thought about that before. But once I started to leave the kind of comfort zone I was in, and then I started looking around, and in particular over the past 5 years or so, I think that I've started to see more and more about all those corners of the society, which actually has helped me change the mode of operation. And also it connects to the fact that I'm now tenured, a bit more secure in terms of jobs and so on, is that before, when I'm invited to give a talk or join some kind of panel or some kind of events out, it was automatically yes. And then I love to be there. I'm excited to be there. But these days I'm doing less of that. And then whenever I can think of other people who can benefit better from joining those forums or the panels or something like that, I always kind of, let's say, started to forward all those requests rather than to accept them more. So, well, that said, I should have actually forwarded your invitation to those people as well. But my guess is that you've been actually contacting a broad set of people anyway. So, and then it sounded so fun to be on this. But yeah, so nothing that dramatically changed it in a sense that I flipped my stance from one to not the other, but I started to form more opinions that I never even thought were the opinions that I would have formed back then. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right. We're certainly trying. We're trying to reach out to
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
What is something you've changed your mind about recently or in distant past?
I changed my mind about usually I don't change my mind. So sometimes some about yes some people, for example, maybe I like them a lot when I see them. After at some point, then I realize, oh, they're not as good as I thought, and so so that might happen. The opposite way can also happen. Like some people don't leave you a very good first impression, but as it goes on, you start admiring them and so on. So but I don't have I don't have a particular example in mind that I can point you to. So yeah, that's usually when I make a decision or have an impression, I usually don't change it, and I stick to it.
What is something you've changed your mind about in recently or in distant past?
Well, I grew up quite religious, and so my internal thoughts about religion and the different value placed on certain ritualistic practices has evolved over time.
Interesting.
Yes, that's probably also another surprising fact people wouldn't know about me, was that I grew up actually in like a very religious community. At some point in my life, I was I would go to these like very, very small insular schools of like 30 girls. Just that's it for our high school. And yeah, it was quite different than going to Berkeley afterwards.
I haven't gone to Berkeley, obviously, but what I understand about Berkeley is that it's the last bastion of liberal presence in America. Was that a culture shock, an adjustment, or by that time you had already changed your mind on things?
I had already started to change my mind as like a young teenager, and I sort of like begged my family to send me to a slightly less religious school for my junior and senior year. So I'd had a sort of transition out of the like, my argument was I wanted more academics because the previous school, most of the day was spent studying non-academic material. Yeah. So, but it was still a shock because my high school, I think, had it. I don't know, there were maybe 30 people in my grade. And so then to go and have my first lecture be already 400 people, it's like bigger than my whole school in a room in my lecture. So, yeah.
What is something you've changed your mind about recently or in distant past?
Oh, that's easy. I used to believe that what you're supposed to do is write down the optimization problem, find the best minimum you can, ideally the global minimum, or as fast as you can, right? And then if you don't like the answer, change the optimization problem. Okay. Right? So change your regularizer to L1 or change your an L1 plus an L2, right? What you don't do, I used to believe, is think, oh, I'll just give the gradient a little trim over here and over here because it's getting a bit hairy, and maybe I'll just divide all the weights by 1.004 every time, except for those really big ones, which I'll divide by 17. So
and you imagine whoever is doing this to also have that particular accent that you just
probably, yeah, and the hand movement and the little sort of Swedish chef kind of kind of actions, and that the reason is that then you see, because I got myself into the safe place, right? Define your optimization problem, find the optimum as fast as you can, and obviously the reason is it's much easier to think about that, right? You could just use the geometry of the minimum as the thing to think about. You don't need to. It's easy on the brain. So we know now that of course you should use SGD, when you've got roughly IID, or when you can roughly IIDize when you've got a sum of thingies, you should probably use some sort of SGD. We know now that what actually matters overall is, what results you can reliably achieve in what amount of time. And, highfalutin principles like define the problem and then solve it don't actually match reality. And, I still much prefer to add lambda W squared to the objective than to, have a line saying weight decay, I guess, I don't really have a good idea for what I mean by dropout, how I do that in a principled way. So that's, I've given up that high-mindedness, and now I mix it in with a bit of, gradient trimming.
Fair enough, fair enough. And I have to agree, I've gone through that journey myself. There's actually an interesting philosophical parallel to this. Like I find myself being particularly utilitarian at times, and saying that so the philosophy that I ascribe to is, if someone finds a strategy that you do not like, you do not blame the person, you blame the game. If the game allows for a cheating strategy, then the person who finds it is not at fault. The game is at fault, because clearly your objective is allowing for it. So you go back and you change your objective. But what the history of machine learning and like SGD is now teaching us, well, it seems like how we go about solving these problems is an easier handle on these, rather than first fixing all objective functions, so that then we can make a claim about the minimum.
Yes, it's interesting, because it's interesting the use of the word easier there, because of course it's kind of easy to think about it's like curing symptoms rather than curing the disease, like trimming the gradient, adding weight decay. These things, they're easy to think about, but they're not easy to play forward. So it's harder to kind of predict, what's happening, to describe what's happening. But they're easier to think about. It's like one of my current bugbears is discount and reinforcement learning. It's like gamma is 1 is the problem I actually want to solve, right? I want to solve, my undiscounted fixed horizon. I want everything to be right, and this crazy discount is, if and people say, oh, it's there to manage uncertainty about the future. It's like, yeah, we have probability distributions. We know how to manage uncertainty about the future. But I know that I kind of suspect that the same thing is true here, that, it's just things work better that way. But I don't want to fall into the gap, or the trap of things work better that way. So don't question the status quo, right?
Ultimately, wherever we converge, somebody has got to do the hard work of realizing that weight decay is just the same as negative lambda, and then norm square. Like, somebody's got to make that equivalence, and then we'll be happy.
Yeah, probably, but maybe not. Maybe the world would never have been better if people made that equivalence. Maybe it would have been fine to just proceed with weight decay. But no, I mean, I totally, I think we're very aligned on this, right? It's easier to write down what you want to happen rather than how it's going to happen. But we've had to include both.
What is something that you've changed your mind about?
A lot of things. A lot of things. Like, I mean, I was, I don't know, like, from all aspects, like disliking things when you were young to now, like, you can't live without. I don't know, like, for example, I talk about food a lot in this thought, even though it doesn't occupy much, but like, for example, I was a very picky eater when I was a kid. I think that all of us, and now I eat almost everything. Or I have changed a lot of like my mind about sort of, liking or disliking different directions at work, pursuing different things. And in this case also, like, I think it was a very, like, liking a direction and disliking it afterwards. That has also happened.
Do you have a, like, do you want to say which one, just so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I in particular, so, you know, like, for example, I dislike heavily now working on problems to increase like a few points in performance in a task. It's a direction I like. Even though I like the problem, I dislike the goal. So that is something that, but well, in the past, it was sort of like a very driving force. But for me, it was a problem I was excited about, but also it was like, it was very like not solved, and we were very not good at. So they're, you know, increasing, I feel that increasing performance in the past when I was working on something could have a potential more impact. Now I feel that it's something that if a student comes or a collaborator comes and wants to work on this, I will have to grill them a lot to understand the motivation in order to get into it.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
What is something that you have changed your mind about?
I think one of the things I used to think, again, I mean, again, related to work, I'm sorry, but one of the things that as a roboticist, I was very convinced about was kind of like, I have to see hardware experiments to believe like a paper has any value to it. And, you know, after talking to you and a lot of other people, I have changed my mind about that. I don't think there's value to robotics hardware experiments in isolation. Like, there has to be more than one hardware experiment to actually add value. And two, I am like starting to see the value in doing actually larger scale simulation studies, which can give us more, you know, well-defined answers than single hardware experiments. I mean, I still understand the people who say that, oh, but you know, what simulation doesn't transfer and so on, but I think it's something I'm changing my mind, and I'm hoping most of robotics field at some point would also see the value on the other side of this.
Awesome. You have no idea how happy I am with that answer.
Well, congratulations to you, right? But it's something I definitely have learned since working with you and a lot of other folks at FAIR.
Welcome to the dark side.
See, I'm not saying that simulations are the answer. Don't misquote me right now.
It is the hallmark of a true roboticist that they feel that their reputation is on the line if they are seen in the wrong company of people
Yes.
doing simulation. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the hallmark of every academician, every academic, not just roboticist. But yeah, my husband and I, when we are throwing insults at each other, we say, "You are a simulation person."
I see. Yeah, talk about separating work from personal.
Yeah.
What is something that you've changed your mind about?
I try to change my mind about things if one presents me with good reasons, but can't remember anything recently. Probably changed my mind about political topics that I don't actually want to get into. I actually try to change my mind about political topics because I think people should have an open mind and be willing to accept other views, but I can't remember anything in particular, I suppose. Oh, well, this wouldn't be especially interesting. I guess I don't like overhyped things or hype things, so I'm probably by no means unique if I say I didn't like deep learning at first, right? And then change my mind, but I'm sure that's pretty common. yeah, I guess I just started being opposed to things that others like. That's the goth in me, I suppose.
That others like or others hype?
Yeah, that others hype. If they actually like it, I'm just afraid that they like it just because it's popular. And so I have to be contrarian.
Fair enough.
What is something you've changed your mind about? It could be recent or in distant past.
Yeah, I think the last couple of years have been, I think, really eye-opening in lots of ways, particularly in, I wouldn't even say change my mind, but just there's been, I mean, so many conversations about diversity in machine learning and diversity in tech generally. I feel like these are conversations I have almost daily now with colleagues, friends, reading online. I mean, I think things are very much kind of in movement and in kind of dynamic flux. I think in a positive way. I mean, there's still so much further to go. But I find myself really just reading a lot and talking a lot and really just I don't know. I've actually found it to be a really exciting time and a really interesting time, even if not a I don't know. I mean, a surprising amount of my day goes to these questions or conversations around these questions, and so I think I'm constantly kind of changing my mind or understanding new things in that space.
Makes sense. What is something you've changed your mind about?
Recently or in general?
Either one.
I woke up one morning like 4 years ago and just stopped drinking and just like haven't had any alcohol since. It wasn't like a particularly insightful event or anything. I just woke up, I had a couple beers the night before and I woke up and I was like, my head hurts. And I'm pretty sure this stuff is poison. So maybe I should stop drinking poison, even if it's fun poison. And I just didn't drink again after that, at least until today. Up till now so far. Which, I had a very positive attitude towards alcohol before as, a general social lubricant. But I just stopped one day.
It was fascinating. And you've, was it something that you were trying, or you went through a phase or you went through on that moment that I now have changed my mind about this? Yeah,
I'm really good at abstaining practices. Right. So if I go on a diet, I'm happy to say I eat 1,300 calories a day starting at 4 p.m. No problem. It's sort of gray middle areas that I have trouble with because you can rationalize some ups and some downs, and then it sort of decays in different directions. So full prohibitions, I'm generally pretty good at. And this was just, I woke up and it just wasn't a thing anymore. My wife made wine out of blackberries in Oregon, and I tried some and then spit it out. I didn't even swallow the sip of wine. It was just, I'm no longer a person who drinks alcohol as an identity element in some weird way.
What is something that you have changed your mind about? Well, maybe it could be recently or in distant past.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't think I've got a good answer. Yeah, I mean, that's not to say I don't. Hopefully I do change my mind. I perhaps should change my mind more. But I honestly can't think of a good answer to that one. So we'll move on.
No worries. What is something you've changed your mind about?
I used to think that what is some? I mean, I still think that, so maybe I've not really changed my mind. There's so many things. I have to think about this. What is one particular thing? But there's so many. different things. One thing maybe you can say I was so I was very I had very strong objections about sort of organized religion, and over time I've sort of come to realize that they serve their purpose. So maybe I'm not like strongly opposed to religion. I don't follow it, but I'm not extremely sort of against it. Like there are certain versions which I'm definitely sort of strongly against, but I've mellowed down on the less strong versions.
Yeah. What is something that you've changed your mind about?
Oh, that's an interesting question. One of my favorite quotes is from Calvin and Hobbes, which is that my opinions may have changed, but not the fact that I'm right. So I tend not to think about the things that I've actually changed my mind about, even though I changed my mind about a lot of things, right? One of the things that, if you look at the emails that I send out, I have a line at the bottom of it, which is don't just adopt opinions, develop them. And I try very much to think about that, you know, it's okay to have an opinion about something so long as you recognize that you've thought about it or you haven't thought enough about it. So there are lots of things I've walked in thinking the world is one way and then being convinced that it isn't. And that happens all the time. That's how it happened as recently as this week on something internal that has to do with policy and process in Georgia Tech, which I will not bore you with. So it happens all the time that I change my mind about things, but I prefer to think of it as revising my model of the world. And so, you know, I mean, if you think carefully about it, so much of the way I operate in the universe appears to be about avoiding ever being wrong, right? So it's about, if I'm revising, then it's okay because I wasn't actually wrong. I just learned more. So I think there's perhaps a lot of that in the way that I kind of deal with the world. I don't have to be uncomfortable with something because, you know, I got better at it. I don't have to be insecure about it because the future still exists and there's a chance to get better. I'm trying to think of so that's my answer to your question, but I'm trying to think of something that was really, really big that I sort of changed my mind about. And I don't think, the only things I can think of in that space have to do with kind of social realities of the way people live that are completely outside of my personal experience. But that felt less like having changed my mind than suddenly being made aware of something that I had simply never thought about. That happens a lot, right? That there are people who experience the world in a way radically different from the way that I do, and that is not just a legitimate view of the world, but it's common, right? And that I have to think about that in order to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. That happens a lot. Yeah, that happens a lot. But I don't, you know, that seems perfectly fine to me. I mean, you would kind of want it to be that way.
Yeah, because the only way to not be in that state is to have just a perfect replica of the world, of a static world in your head, which
and the world isn't static and it's always changing. So yeah.
I really liked your phrasing of revising and updating your models, and I was almost surprised Bellman updates didn't show up in that description.
Well, that's all. I mean, well, that was just intuitively obvious, even to the most casual observer. So, you know, that was just implicit in everything that I was saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's about right, isn't it?
Yeah. Left as an exercise for the reader.
Yes. One of my favorite expressions.
What is something you've changed your mind about?
Oh, so this is one. I used to be in love with like Bayesian probabilistic graphical models, and I really considered doing PhD for logic AI as well in early phase in my career. And I was proving lots of logical statements, and some of these homeworks required like several pages of proofs for something that I already know the conclusion of, but you have to write down all the induction.
Yeah, I went through that phase as well in my PhD, where it was, you know, Daphne Coller's book and Carlos Kestrin and Ben Tasker's
Yeah,
and Thorsten
beautiful
Joachim's
stuff.
work. It was
Yeah.
just so beautiful. How could you not
Yeah.
fall in love with that work?
Yeah.
And then
It's weird what happened in the field.
You meet the
weird.
hard reality of computer vision and NLP problems, and you realize it
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work.